My heels left a rhythm on the lobby tiles, like a metronome counting out a life I was supposed to be proud of. Each tap announced another late night, another press release rewritten, another client calmed, another problem that somehow I fixed with a calm I didn't always feel. The doorman nodded like he always did. The elevator sighed and took me up. The mirrored walls doubled my reflection, until it seemed like the building had more of me than my family ever did. Ava Mercer, 32 today, Senior Communications Director at Summit Communication. Green eyes, tailored blazer, a tired smile that had survived a dozen keynote presentations. I told myself birthdays were for children. I told myself I was an adult who negotiated million-dollar contracts and handled crises at dawn. I told myself I did not want, nor need, fanfare. I unlocked my door and the apartment greeted me with the polite emptiness of a place people visit, but rarely stay. The small cake I'd bought that morning sat on the coffee table like an accusation. A single candle stood upright in the center, waiting for a breath that wouldn't come from anyone else. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and let the silence land around me. "Happy birthday, Ava," I said to the empty room, because silence demanded something. Work had swallowed my day and left me with that cherry-sweet cake as a consolation prize. I hovered over my laptop to bury my loneliness in a spreadsheet, or a slide deck. Instead of sanity, I opened Facebook, and the screen exploded into a scene that narrowed my chest until I could barely breathe. There was my brother Liam, glass of champagne raised, haloed by the grins of cousins and aunts and men I vaguely recognized from holiday photos. A banner hung behind him. "Congratulations on the promotion." There was my father beside him, arm around Liam's shoulders like he'd always been the family trophy. My mother stood on the other side, smiling the way social photographers teach people to smile. The timestamp read 4 hours ago. My birthday. The image after image landed like punches. Entire rooms filled with family I hadn't seen since childhood reunions. Plates of food, speeches, a man in a suit I'd only ever known as my brother. The comments were a parade of pride. "So proud of our Liam," my father wrote. "The Mercer name continues," my mother added. Their words bent the air around me. I scrolled and found photo after photo of Liam basking in attention. I found a video of him accepting congratulations, all teeth and charm. I found one of Mom holding a champagne flute and whispering, "My boy," like a liturgy repeated until it became true. The images multiplied until my apartment shrank. There were no messages for me. No late-night calls. No midnight texts from anyone promising cake. Memory surfaced like a tide. Warm and bitter. 11 years old. Waiting at a restaurant table with a melting candle while the rest of my family cheered at Liam's debate win. 17. Shuffled off to a relative's house while Mom and Dad toured colleges with Liam. My college graduation overshadowed by Liam's engagement announcement at the same dinner. The sacrifices had always had a name. His name. A work email blinked open. Mechanic response. My fingers hovered. "Bonus," it said, "for leading the Crestford turnaround. $82,000. The number landed like a small meteor. I had been saving for a rainy day. Or perhaps for nothing at all. My phone rang then, an unexpected buzz that made me start. "Hello?" I answered, because hope, however foolish, is stubborn. "Ava darling," my mother's voice spilled across the line like honey and guilt. "I'm so glad I caught you. We're planning something for Liam and Claire's anniversary. I was hoping you could help with the catering. You're so good at that sort of thing." The clock leaned toward midnight. My birthday slid away beneath the weight of my mother's words. "Mom," I said, and concentrated on keeping my voice steady. "Today was my birthday." "Oh," a short silence. With Liam's promotion, it just slipped our minds. Like birthdays were small stones she could drop in a bag of larger, heavier things. Something shifted under my ribs then. Something tectonic and terrible and clarifying at once. I listened to the polite guilt-suffused voice, and felt a stillness bloom into something like resolve. "Fine," the word felt alien and clean on my tongue. "I understand what's important." 4 days later, a fluke invitation let me into the family group chat I'd been habitually excluded from. Threads unraveled across the screen with a casual cruelty. "Liam should get a substantial gift," my father wrote. "At least 20,000. My mother replied. "Now that she has that bonus, maybe she can finally contribute to the family for once." My name was misspelled in the message. Not Ava, but Ava. A careless wink that said everything. Even my name. My identity was shorthand. Dispensable. I sat at my desk at Summit Communications, the Chicago skyline pressed against the glass, and felt small for the first time in years, not from failure but neglect. Maya, my colleague and friend, stuck her head in with that sharp practical expression I'd loved since orientation. "Your brother's online," she said, then softened as she saw me staring. Everything okay? He pulled Region Tech's CMO into a dinner for his investment firm without asking me, I said, turning my laptop. Used our contacts like I don't exist. Maya read the thread and clicked her tongue. Third time? That's messed up. And your dad suggested 20 grand? It's time I support the family, I said, tasting steel. You earned that bonus, she said simply. If Daniel didn't think you deserved it, it wouldn't be there. Daniel Park, our CEO, appeared through the doorway then, his suit flawless like armor. Ava, he said, and handed me a folder as if it were an offering. The Crestford numbers came in. 41% increase. The board's ecstatic. You saved that account? You did it, he added, pressing his hand to my shoulder. I felt warm from the praise, like sunlight on winter water. At home that evening, I knocked on Mrs. Calder's door, my chosen family. At 83 she moved with the practical dignity of someone who had lived for herself long before the world required anything of her. Tuesday evenings for the last 3 years were our ritual. I brought news in a takeaway container. She supplied dessert and They spelled your name wrong, I told her, after I'd unspooled the thread in the cruel arithmetic. Her fingers closed over mine. Some parents only see what mirrors back their own ambitions, she said. Sometimes they don't even know their children because they're busy admiring a reflection. Her words lodged in me like a seed finding soil. Saturday night at the Mercer home was a study in old habits. The stone stoop, the chandelier tempering light into gold, the linens set with surgical precision. My mother fussed with flowers. My father poured scotch with the same confident motion he used to make decisions about my life. Liam and Claire sat on the sofa like a curated advertisement for success. Dinner followed its choreography. Conversations orbited Liam. I pushed salmon around my plate until my father cleared his throat. Eva, he said, precise as a judge. We need to talk about your contribution to Liam and Claire's anniversary. 20,000 should cover venue and catering. All eyes turned. The room became small and hot and loud. My mother's pearls flashed. Family supports family, darling, she said as if it were scripture. When did you support me? I asked, low and steady. When did you ask what I needed? My question landed, and did what I'd secretly hoped it would do, hollow out the room. Their faces moved through confusion, indignation, hurt, emotions they rehearsed when playing the villagers in their favorite old drama. You can't refuse, my father said, voice folding like a well-practiced scold. Your brother is carrying on the Mercer name. The least you can do is support him. My hands tightened on the napkin. I can't give 20,000, I said. That's a quarter of my bonus. I have other plans. The silence that followed was sharp as glass. My mother's eyes filmed with tears that seemed more performance than greed. After all we've done for you, she whispered, and I saw the strings they thought they were pulling. For what exactly? I asked before I could stop myself. What have you done for me? The question detonated like a fault line. That night I left the way people leave when they have finally learned the map of their own boundaries. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I walked out with the furniture of my life in the trunk of my car, my resume, my degrees, my quiet dignity. At the wheel, hands trembling, I made a promise that felt like taking a breath after holding it underwater for too long. 2 weeks later, I found a listing for a house by the water, a small stubborn thing with wide windows and a deck that promised morning. The listing called it a 4-bedroom, practical but with a presence like somebody who had once been loved and was waiting to be loved again. Price $365,000. It fit. It fit like a clean, bright outfit that finally looked the way you felt inside. I told no one. I signed papers in a small office, with a wry realtor, who liked motivational podcasts and a closing agent who smiled like he had seen better endings. Mrs. Calder came with me for the keys. You're doing the right thing, she said, and patted my hand like a benediction. The lake house became my practice in making decisions for myself. I painted a wall a color I loved. I hung the photos I'd earned. I called my friend Maya, and Daniel, and my boss Greg and invited them to a quiet housewarming. For the first time I chose who would witness the life I was building. I posted the photos like handing out invitations. A picture on the cedar deck, bare feet, a glass of wine. The lake rolled behind me like a promise. The caption read, "Weekend at my new place. Birthday gift to myself." I expected the usual flurry of supportive messages from friends and colleagues. I did not expect the hurricane. My phone lit and sounded with an urgency that made my chest drop. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages. My mother's name had rung 8 times in 15 minutes and each voicemail had the same tone I knew too well. Familial possession, worry that sharpened into accusation. "Where did you get the money for a house?" the messages asked. "This is reckless. We need to talk. Your brother is on his way to your office. Do not make this worse. I stood on the deck, the wind moving my hair like a small benediction, and slid the phone into my pocket. Let them call, I thought. Let them assemble their chorus. For now the sun was warm on my face, and the cup I'd made of my life was full. Inside, friends arrived with charred steaks and laughter that smelled like newness. My boss brought a bottle of wine and a note that said, "Celebrate yourself." Miss Calder wrapped me in a quilt she'd stitched from old fabric scraps. Maya brought a plant because a house needed roots as much as a heart. We ate outside as the sun set, boats like small dark ornaments on a glittering horizon. I felt a kind of fragile joy I had learned to avoid, because it always bloomed in places where the wind could blow it away. Tonight it held. Then my phone vibrated again, this time a message from a cousin meant to be casual and deliciously invasive. "Everyone's talking about your lake house," it read. "Your parents are beside themselves. Expect a family meeting." I laughed then, not because the situation was funny, but because I had been waiting for their worry to arrive like a predictable storm. My new life had not been hidden forever, nor had their need to control. "Let them," I said to my friends, and their eyes shone with a sisterhood I'd chosen. We raised our glasses under a sky that had nothing to do with Mercer expectations. That night I slept with the window open, and the sound of lapping water in my ear. It was a different kind of quiet, not the silence of absence, but the hush of something being born. Monday at Summit brought the ripple of gossip. The corporate rumor mill does not consider privacy. My cousin called with her practiced concern. "They're saying you hid money," she said. "They're saying you're unstable. They're saying..." That sounds exactly like something they'd say, I cut in, and the laughter in my voice surprised me as much as it surprised her. Then the call I dreaded came. My mother, insistent and composed enough to try to make hurt into strategy, said words that had a sharpened edge. "This has gone far enough," she said. "Reverend Wallace has even asked about this. It's creating an uncomfortable situation for our family." "A family meeting," she added, as if reading off of a script the way she always did. I should have been intimidated. Instead, I felt a quiet, dangerous clarity settle over me. They wanted to pull the net back over me, to convince me that I had stepped beyond the boundaries of what was allowed. They wanted to make my independence an embarrassment for the rest of the clan. 7 o'clock Sunday, she said, "and bring the photo albums." Photo albums. The word hit me with the shape of a plan forming. I knew the albums I had watched those albums pile up through the years, pages filled with smiling faces, with Liam in the center like a sun, and me, if I made the pages at all, an afterthought at the edge. On Sunday I walked up the granite steps of the Mercer house, with 3 albums under my arm, feeling like a prosecutor, with evidence and a heart full of an anger I'd only recently permitted to wake. My father opened the door with that practiced look of authority. "You're late," he said, the sentence meant to wound. My mother's makeup had been applied with the exact lines of someone determined to look aggrieved. Liam watched from the living room, a drink in his hand, his posture the practiced ease of someone who had never had to wait for affection. "Quinn," my father called, except my name is Ava now, in this version of the story, and I set the albums down carefully like laying out facts on a table. "You shouldn't have brought this," my mother said, before I could start. "Make time," I said. I opened an album and let the images speak. Liam at 6, Liam at 12, Liam with a car at 18, with a giant bow, Liam in every frame like an heirloom. I slid the second album across the table, her fingers hovered, then trembled as she opened it. Empty pages blinked back. A few photographs. Miss Calder at 30, a solitary cupcake, with a candle, proof of a life lived mostly without them. I laid out receipts, tickets, calendars showing where I was when they celebrated him. The evidence built a pattern, as cold and convincing as a spreadsheet. Miles, no, Liam had been the favored one. The numbers had names, the photographs had voices, the empty space where my childhood should have been screamed louder than any defense. I closed the final album and left it on the sideboard. "I don't need your approval," I told them. "I don't need your validation." I walked out the door with the lightest step I'd taken in years. A year later, my 33rd birthday dawned golden across my lake. A table glowed with candles, friends brought pastries. I had learned the meaning of community chosen rather than given. I had a promotion. I had a life that matched my work and my worth. But some things don't change so easily. A car door slammed outside the party. Liam stood at the edge of my deck, uncertain, holding a wrapped package. He shuffled closer, the afternoon humming and awkward. He said, "I wanted to give you I surprised myself by inviting him to sit. There was a gap between us that therapy and time had started to mend. He pushed the package my way. Inside was a photograph from years ago, the one of me at 7, on an old tired swing, laughing at a thing only I could remember. He had found it in a box in my father's storage, had it restored. Proof you were here, he said. I didn't know. It was small and enormous all at once. For a moment the hurt softened, and the party hummed back to life. Then I saw my mother through the window, clutching a bakery box like a peace offering. She had shown up for the first time in months. A cupcake with a candle sunk at its center. Her hand trembled. She remembered that I liked carrot cake. I opened the door and offered her a place at the table. For a beat, the years rolled back like film. For the first time in a long while, the Mercer home felt like it might have room for me. When the guests left and the dock emptied, I watched the sunset, and thought about the strange, slow work of reassembling a life. I raised my glass to the woman who finally taught herself that validation begins inside. Then my phone lit up. 17 missed calls, 32 messages, my mother's name blinking like a lighthouse. I picked it up and read the first message. Where did you get the money for a house? We need to talk. I looked out over the water. The sky turned the color of a promise half kept, and I laughed softly because I had already answers they would never want to hear. I had already given myself what I deserved. But their calls were not just about money. They were about control, about the shape of stories, about who is allowed to be seen. I pocketed the phone, lifted my glass, and let the lake keep its own counsel. And yet when the notifications piled up, I felt the shape of the next confrontation forming like thunder on a distant horizon. The morning after the party, sunlight pushed through the blinds and painted lines across my kitchen table like a ruler measuring the new distance between me and the Mercer world. The lake had a way of making everything look cleaner, sharper, as if the water could scrub away the fog they'd left behind. I made coffee and burned the toast because my hands wouldn't stop trembling from the night before. Good trembling like the kind that comes with starting over. Notifications bubbled up like distant storms. Most were warm messages from colleagues. A text from Greg. Proud of you. Drinks on me Friday. Maya sent a string of voice notes that made me laugh until I cried. Miss Calder had left a note pinned to the fridge with a magnet that read "Keep living bravely," and I kept it there as if it were armor. Then there were the other kinds of messages. A cousin's passive-aggressive group text with a link to a gossip column. A neighbor's concerned DM asking if I was all right. A forwarded email from someone who'd once worked with my father hinting that my lake house purchase was concerning given industry ethics. The chorus was forming, and part of being toward the beginning of a life you choose is learning that the old chorus knows the same songs they always sang. At work the air felt pointed. A few people whispered in the doorway and then walked away when I looked. Daniel caught me by the elevator with a look that contained both admiration and worry. You're handling this like a pro, he said. But be careful, family stuff leaks. People like a story that fits what they already want to believe. It's not a scandal, I said. I bought a house. I paid for it. That's the end of it. Perception isn't always cooperative, he said. If anyone pushes, tell me. The firm stands by you. He meant it, and that mattered. But corporate loyalty runs on optics too. The first hit came after lunch when an anonymous post started circulating on a local business forum. Did anyone else hear about the PR exec with the lake house? Rumors can be like wildfire. They don't need matches so much as dry brush. I called Liam. He didn't pick up. That afternoon he showed up at the office like a ship that had lost its way. He stood in my doorway with the kind of awkward apology that had been honed by a life of being forgiven before the offense landed. Ava, he began. Hey, what do you want, Liam? He looked smaller somehow, the spotlight he'd always known suddenly irritating him like sandpaper. I didn't mean to make things hard. Dad, he said we needed to talk to you. To smooth things over. Smooth things over with what? A check. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. You're here because Mom and Dad are worried people will talk. They're worried about appearances. I'm worried about appearances too, he said, surprising me with the honesty beneath his practiced ease. People have been whispering. It hurts my career when family drama follows me. Then stop fueling it, I said. Stop taking calls that drag other people's names into your dinner plans. Stop letting them think they can use me. He swallowed. You don't get it. They've been pushing. They've been using you. Convincing me it's just family. He scrubbed a hand over his face. You think I like this? You think I wanted? I'm not the enemy, Liam, I said. But you have to choose whether their idea of family includes the rest of us. The conversation trailed away when the building's intercom crackled. My phone buzzed with another anonymous thread, suggesting that my bonus might be under review by HR after some concerns were raised. HR called me into a small conference room. all neutral tones and practiced concern. Ava, this came across my desk, Helen from HR said, voice gentle as if she were handing me a fragile cup. We've had an anonymous complaint about potential conflict of interest related to personal property purchases tied to client contact. I stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. This is absurd. I used my bonus money. There's no conflict. We just need to confirm, Helen said. It's procedure. Transparency. Fine, I said. Do your checks. But it's a witch hunt. This is family gossip dressed in corporate clothes. Word travels. My inbox filled with polite notes from clients checking in, and in the spaces between their concern and their congratulation I felt the tug of something that felt like shame. Someone else tried to sling my way. I knew how to build narratives for a living. Now I found myself on the receiving end of one being braided around me. At night the text turned religious. A neighbor sent a screenshot of a pastor's post about modesty and humility followed by the comment, "Sometimes people need to be reminded what matters more than houses." My mother called late and left a message that began with the practiced warmth and ended with a clipped reminder. "Come to the meeting on Sunday," she said. "Bring anything you like. We can all talk this through." "Bring anything I like," I repeated, smiling despite myself. Of course. I spent the week preparing the way a lawyer prepares for cross-examination. I gathered bank statements, transfer receipts and emails proving the source of funds for the house. I printed copies of the closing document. I scanned the photo albums again, and made 2 copies, one to leave at home as my personal archive, the other to bring if I needed to show them under fluorescent dining room lighting. But what they really wanted was not proof. They wanted acquiescence. They wanted a return to the quiet shape I'd fitted into like an old glove. I had sewn that glove myself. Now I was allergic to its stitch. Saturday morning, a note arrived on my doorstep. No stamp, just handwriting. My mother's, I thought at first. The paper read, "We worry. Love. Mom and Dad." It felt like a trap. The more generous reading was that they cared. The less generous reading was that the note was the first attempt at guilt-lacing. The family meeting was more crowded than I expected. The Mercer house folded me into its well-lit arms with the smell of beef and polish. Family friends hovered, like witnesses summoned by reputation. Reverend Wallace smiled like someone who keeps a ledger for human error. "Thank you for coming," my mother began. Her voice was honeyed, the kind of honey that leaves stickiness in its wake. "We know recent events have caused concern. We're not here to blame. We only want unity." "Unity," my father echoed. His jaw worked the way it does when he is deciding which word will work as a tether. I set the albums on the table, careful this time. I had rehearsed the pages in my head like a speech, but instead of a performative breakdown I let the evidence be the work. Photos and spreadsheets and receipts. The room's curated pity shifted in the way a crowd shifts when a weather front moves in. "Look at this. This is what your memory looks like when it's selective." My father's face reddened. "This is melodramatic," he said. "We raised you with opportunity. You raised me with opportunity to be an invisible support." I replied. "When we needed help with school fees, who paid for them? When we had to choose who was in the car?" Aunt June tried to smooth it. "We all made mistakes, Ava. Can't we just move forward?" "Move forward?" I laughed then, sharp and something like a blade. "You want me to move forward while you leave me in the past?" The meeting ended, in the kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to unlearn years in one sitting. They called my actions selfish. They called me ungrateful. They called for therapy for stress management. As if I had been misdiagnosed as selfish rather than strategic. The pushback did something useful and dangerous. It ratcheted up the pressure and revealed the fault lines in my brother. He came to me later, eyes like someone trying to find a map for a life they'd been told to inherit. "I don't want to lose my career," he said. "They're asking questions at work. They think I'm irresponsible." "You are not your parents," I said. "You can decide who you are without their permission." "I can't just walk away," he said. "Not yet." He left and the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the pause between a question and an answer. The next week brought an email from a local reporter. "Would you comment on rumors circulating about the Mercer household and allegations of impropriety?" she wrote. I stared at it like a physical thing, and realized the hunger of the world for scandal. I wrote back a simple line. "No comment necessary." Instead of silence I crafted my message. I made a short post with images of the albums, small clipped selections, not an unrolling of the whole life, but just enough to begin to tell the other side. No accusation, only fact. Photos with dates, receipts. A caption that said I bought a house with my bonus money. I chose myself. The response surprised me. Friends rallied. Strangers sent notes of support with their own stories about parents who celebrated someone else. The comments swelled like a wave lifting a small boat. Maya texted, "This is perfect," Daniel wrote. "That was brave." And then the smear surfaced in a new form. Anonymous messages moved like slugs under doors, emails to investors, a comment thread alleging I had misused corporate contacts to secure private dealings. The rumor machine found oxygen in the smallest seam. I had built brands for a living. Now someone else was building a narrative that made me look reckless and unethical. It landed in my inbox as a polite inquiry from a client who had always been clear-eyed and pragmatic. "We heard some concerning things," the message read. "We value transparency. Are you able to confirm the independence of the transactions you've made?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wrote back with the same clarity I give my clients when a crisis hits. "Transparency, documentation, attached, let's have a call." On the day we scheduled the call, my power went out at the lake house. Not a storm, nothing obvious. The lights simply died while I was reviewing paperwork for the meeting. I called the utility company. No outages listed in my area. My heart did a small, unfamiliar flip. Someone had cut through the dark spaces and made a new one. I drove to the house that night, headlights carving a path over water and grass. The lake reflected the sky like a black mirror. The porch light was off, doors locked as they should be. I opened the front door and found the living room intact. The quilts on the couch where Mrs. Calder had left them. The back door, my back door, had a smudge of mud on the latch. Not enough for fingerprints. Enough for a message. On the kitchen counter lay an envelope. Handmade, heavy paper. No return address. My name was written in a careful hand. Inside was a single photograph. It was taken from outside the house, cropped close on one of my bedroom windows. In the dim light from inside the glass, the silhouette of a chair and a stack of books was visible. Taped to the back of the photo was a small scrap of paper with 4 words, "You shouldn't have left." My stomach turned cold in a way that no argument at a dining room table had ever managed. The room that had been my sanctuary hummed with a new kind of electricity. They had started with voices and appearances. Now they had moved to surveillance. I called Liam, hands shaking. Did you? I started. "Liam," he said, and his voice was thin. "What is it? Who was at the house?" I asked. Silence answered me first. Then a half-breathed, "I don't know. Ava, listen, I didn't. Don't lie to me," I said. "If they hired someone, if they are trying to scare me, I'm not involved," he said quickly, too quickly. "I promise." The doubt settled anyway, like dust. Family can be both shield and blade. Whoever had sent the photo wanted me to feel exposed, to know they could find me. Whoever it was wanted me to be afraid. I called Daniel and told him everything. He came out that night with a flashlight and a look that said he was not merely a boss but an ally. "We'll call the police if you want," he said. "No," I said. "Not yet. If they wanted to make it dramatic, they would love that. They want a reaction. They want me rattled. Then document everything," Daniel said. "And be visible. Light is the best disinfectant." So I posted a photo the next day, not the menacing one, but my own, me on the deck with a mug, sunrise and steam, and my bare feet on the weathered wood. The caption read, "Someone sent me this last night. It made me feel watched. I am fine. I am not afraid." The post did something alchemical. It rallied the people who had already seen me. It made the watcher less anonymous, and less powerful. The comments came in like a human net. People offered to stay overnight. A neighbor offered to install a camera. The local paper ran a piece about privacy and harassment, with an interview that quoted my line about choosing yourself. But the message that ended the week, and the one that tightened like a noose of possibility, arrived on Sunday morning, just before I was due to meet with Liam for coffee. My father had filed a notice with a local attorney seeking a civil review of the house purchase, claiming concerns about whether the funds had any tie to family assets. I read the notice twice. Logic can be a blunt instrument in the hands of those who want to wound. They had the gravity of the family name behind them. They were using the frame of propriety to make me look irresponsible. They were trying to find a legal angle because when emotion stops working, law is a language families with legacy understand. I sat on the dock, feet in the cold water, letting it take the heat out of me. Guilt and fear are cousins. I felt neither. I felt something that was steady and sharp and very human. The urge to protect what I had built without turning it over. Liam met me there, coffee in hand, and a way of looking at me that tried to calculate allegiance. "They're trying to make me pick," he said. "They think I'll choose them if they scare you enough." "That's their plan?" I asked. "To make me ashamed of you," he said. "Then don't be ashamed," I told him. "Be honest. If you want to be part of my life, You can start by telling them no. He folded his hands and looked out over the water. I don't know how to stop being their son, he said, but I can try. Try, I said, and stop answering for them. He nodded slowly as if the word had weight. I'll try. The next morning, the attorney's notice arrived in my inbox with the crisp cruelty of bureaucracy. My father was invoking the family's reputation as if it were a suit of armor he could don to deflect the discomfort of his own choices. They wanted documents. They wanted a narrative. I began to build mine in return, not a retaliation. A record, receipts, signatures, calls with timestamps. I hired a lawyer of my own, someone who smelled of sharp corners and competence. She called in the afternoon and asked one question that made everything simpler. Would you like me to file a declarative statement? She said. Public. Lay the money trail out. Make the record reflect the truth. Yes, I said. Make it loud. Make it clear. Her voice held in it a careful pride. We will do it cleanly. We'll make sure their lawyer knows the truth. The week stretched with hearings and emails, and a small titanic effort to keep ordinary life in motion. I presented to a new client, and initiated the kind of meeting that used to exhaust me and now filled me with a quiet fury that felt like justice. People kept offering to help in small human ways. Meals, texts in the night, offers to be on call. On a Thursday morning when the case files were heavy and the press had begun to sniff around like dogs on a scent, I received a package at the lake house. It was left on the steps. No signature. Inside was a single object, an old key on a leather fob that had belonged to my father's high school club. Tied to the key was a note in a hand I recognized without needing to find a name. It's not just about money, it said. I held the key until the metal warmed against my palm. The note's words pressed like a thumb on a bruise. Not just about money. The implication was a map that got all sorts of terrible roads leading to one place. Reputation, control, tradition, the hunger to shape other people's stories to preserve a self-image. They had escalated from neglect to surveillance to legal pressure. The next step could be darker. The key felt like a prelude. Someone was telling me they could unlock doors I didn't know were locked. I walked down to the water and let the cool lake take the heat from my hand. The sky was a clean sheet. There are moments when you realize a story is no longer only about you. It becomes about boundaries and who gets to draw them, and whether you'll let fear redraw them for you. I pulled my phone out and typed a message to Maya. Keep your weekend free. I might need witnesses. She replied with a string of emojis and 3 words that landed with soft defiance. Always got you. I set the phone down and watched a boat cut a white line across the water. The lake did not care about family heritage or legal notice. It only reflected what you put on it. I thought about what I would put on it next. The envelope with the photograph had been a warning. The key was a promise. I had choices. Retreat, and let the narrative they wanted to tell about me become the truth for other people, or step forward and refuse. I chose to step forward. I did not know yet whether I was walking into a storm or toward the calm after it. I only knew that I would not walk away from the life I had built because it made someone else uncomfortable. That night, as I locked my door and checked the windows one more time, a car pulled up across the street. The headlights swept the house and then moved on. For a long minute I thought I had imagined it. Then there was a soft knock at the back door. When I opened it, the porch light threw long bars across the floor. There was no one there. On the step, new and clean as if planted by a careful hand, lay a Polaroid. I picked it up with slow fingers. The photograph was of the lake at night from the vantage of my dock. Someone had stood on the water's edge and taken this picture while I slept. On the photo's blank border someone had written one word in a hurried scrawl. Remember. I looked over my shoulder at the house that felt less like sanctuary tonight, and more like the center of a battlefield. Someone was trying to make sure I never forgot why I had left the old world in the first place. I slid the Polaroid into my back pocket and closed the door. Behind me the house hummed with the ordinary noises of a home. Pipes, the night air through a window, an old clock downstairs marking time. Outside the lake did not answer. Inside I set the photograph on the kitchen counter and lit a candle. The flame cast a small steady light that felt enough for now. In the morning I had a meeting with a client, a deposition with a lawyer, and a brother who might finally pick a side. But that night I slept with the Polaroid under my pillow, and a new kind of stubbornness settled like a weight that was not heavy but solid. They wanted me small and obedient, but I had learned to stand. The next morning I would find out if my standing had consequences beyond. The next morning would be the day their legal letter met my declaration. The next morning would be when the public narrative got a chance to turn. For now I held on to the thought like a talisman. Being seen does not mean being owned. And somewhere beyond the reeds along the shore, something waited with patience. The courthouse smelled like paper and coffee. And other people's battles. People came and left with envelopes clutched like talismans. Cameras waited like patient beasts in the lobby, their lenses glazed with expectation. I walked in with a folder so full of records it rubbed the inside of my bag raw. My lawyer, Mara, moved like a person who had chosen law because she liked to prove things. She had the quiet confidence of someone who could untangle knots other people left behind. "We go public after the filing," she said as we sat in a small conference room furnished with neutrality. "They've got optics. We need facts that are louder." "I have facts," I said. "I have transfers. I have timestamps. I have photos from his storage unit." The words felt heavier in my mouth than any announcement I'd ever made at work. "And I have people who will stand behind me." She nodded. "We'll file the declarative statement. We'll include the ledger. We will make sure the public sees the paper trail." Outside, the rain started, thin at first, and then heavier, as if the sky itself wanted to scrub the city of what was coming. The filing was a simple ritual. A clerk stamped our papers like a hammer, and the seal felt like an exclamation point. Mara set the documents in motion, and then, true to plan, arranged a brief press conference. My phone pinged until it buzzed itself almost still. At noon, the camera lights made me look like someone else. My hands felt steady. The declarative statement was concise and damning in its own way. It laid out the money trail, transfers from family accounts into companies tied to Liam's ventures, invoices with signatures that matched my father's handwriting, a storage unit contract, taken out in my father's name, but containing boxes filled with evidence, photos, ledgers, receipts. These documents show that the family ledgers have been used for years to fund my brother's lifestyle and ventures, Mara said into the microphone. They show decisions made without my client's consent and actions that created both a practical and emotional deficit in her life. Reporters fired questions like rockets. Cameras wanted drama. I gave them what I had, a short statement about truth and the right to make a life of your own. I did not mention revenge. I said I wanted accountability. By that evening the first cracks appeared. My father's lawyers sent a terse letter. Defamatory allegations required retraction, an apology within 48 hours or a lawsuit would follow. My mother sent a voice message that trembled. "We can fix this, Ava. We can handle this together." "Together," I said to the empty house, the word tasting like the hollow center of a candy I once loved but now only ate out of habit. Liam's calls began coming in, each one shorter than the last. He wanted to talk. He wanted to tell me he was sorry. He wanted to ask me to stop. The truth is a merciless thing when it is used like a weapon. The day the police arrived to take statements, the city felt smaller. Someone had filed a complaint about harassment. Someone else had filed a complaint about potential financial misappropriation. The officers were calm and precise, which added to the surreal. My private family had been refashioned into a public problem. I sat across from Detective Morales, and we went through the ledger line by line, until his pen ran out of ink. "Who else knows about this?" he asked. "Only a few people," I said. "My lawyer, a friend who helped me look through the storage unit, and Liam knows bits. He found some old statements years ago but he didn't do anything with them." That last admission felt like dropping a stone into a still pond. The ripples it made were bigger than the moment. Detective Morales leaned back. "We'll need to talk to him." When they did, Liam looked like someone trying to pull himself together in public. He avoided my eyes at first, and then held them like someone looking for permission to break. "I saw some things when I was in the attic with Dad," he said. "I was young. I didn't know what it meant. I thought Dad had reasons. I didn't want to believe otherwise." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I was scared," he said. "You think I like this? You think I wanted this pressure?" "Dad promised me he'd make it right. He promised me that he'd protect me. I thought I was protecting the family." "You protected them at my expense," I said. "You kept silent while they erased me." He flinched. "I didn't know how to be anything else." That night, after he left and the house settled into its familiar creaks, I got a message from a source who had lived in the Mercer orbit for decades. The key I had found felt smaller now. It had been a key to a storage locker where my father had kept boxes, not just full of paperwork but also of staged photographs and purchased accolades. The photos were a revelation. Some were captioned, some annotated, and some appeared to have been arranged as if for a catalog. Liam's first bike staged with a store tag, a fake surprise party with planted guests, receipts for gifts that never made it to the right hand. It amounted to a life curated to spotlight someone else while erasing me. I pushed the discovery out into the world. The reaction was a mixture of vindication and chaos. The family line, Dad's neat, incurious face and a dozen society pieces, began to look like a facade papered over by carefully placed evidence. My mother reached out to me, but the tone of her messages swung like a pendulum. Some were apologies glossed with fragility, some were lines meant to sting. You made this public, now live with the consequences. The family lawyer issued a statement that accused me of twisting facts and exploiting family discord for personal attention. The stench of petty revenge crept in. It could have been a simple win. Truth exposes the lie. Instead, it became a shape-shifting beast. For every ledger I produced, my father produced an accusation of his own. He accused me of tampering with family accounts. He suggested I had fabricated documents. The legal war escalated with the polite brutality of people who knew how to weaponize procedure. And then came the tape. I had been warned about blackmail in my industry. I had built crisis plans to handle disgruntled clients, rogue employees, and smear campaigns. I had never built one for betrayal from within my own bloodline. An anonymous email arrived with a single attachment and zero preface. The file was labeled with a date from a year ago and nothing else. I hesitated, but curiosity is a shape of courage, and I clicked. The video opened in the room I knew instantly. It was my father's study with the same mahogany desk and the carved globe he'd brought back from some early business trip. My father sat in his leather chair, hands folded. My mother sat across from him, face drawn but composed. Liam stood in the doorway, looking small in a suit too large for him. I can't keep doing this, my mother said on the recording. We keep covering for him because we love the image. It's not about image, my father said in a voice that sounded calm and practiced. It's about legacy. The Mercer name has weight. And what about Ava? My mother asked. She's stubborn, my father said. She's always been stubborn, but she'll find her way. Maybe she'll need a push to come back. The camera angle changed. Someone else must have been in the room, because the video cut to a close-up of the ledger on the desk. It lingered on a column of numbers, and an annotation in my father's hand. Move these to the trust accounts, he whispered to someone off camera. No one will know. There was a soft sound, like a pen tapping. What about when she buys something? My mother asked. Then we make sure it looks independent, he said. We stage it, we explain. It's a small thing to preserve the greater good. Are you sure about this? Someone asked. Voice muffled. I'm sure, my father said. She won't fight us. She never fights. The video ended with a laugh, easy and cruel. I watched it 3 times. A hot, sickness rose in my throat. The room tilted. The traitorous part of me that had grown up to forgive in order to survive began to dissolve. The part that had learned to be seen and hold a card up when people lied about you moved forward. I took the file to Mara. She watched without expression and then closed her laptop with a quiet click. This is called evidence, she said. This is damning. And now they will claim it's forged, I said. They can try, Mara said. But we have chain of custody, and you have witnesses, who will corroborate you. And we have this. We released the clip with a demand, an inquiry into possible financial misconduct, and falsification of record. The public reaction was volcanic. People wanted truth. People wanted theatrics. The Mercer family, stately, composed, unruffled in society pages, was exposed as a family that curated lives and controlled narrative. What I had not expected was the speed with which the moral calculus in my brother would shift. Liam called me at midnight with a voice that split wide open. I can't keep pretending, he said. I didn't want to be complicit, but Dad pressured me because he said he'd ruin my career if I spoke. Ruin how? I asked. He said he could pull strings. He said. Contacts, quiet allegations. He said he could make me unemployable if I caused trouble. You didn't tell me that, I said. I was ashamed, he said. I thought I could fix it from inside. I thought I could pay back what we needed and keep everyone calm. You agreed to be quiet, I said, and my voice was small. I agreed because I thought it was the only way out, he said. But when the ledger came up at work, they asked questions. I realized I couldn't be part of it anymore. That confession landed and then broke me in a new way. I had found my power and now watched my brother bow under the weight of the very thing that had been built for him. The pity and fury that rose in me were equal and unyielding. The next morning the headlines were merciless. Mercer family in turmoil. Family patriarch accused of financial misconduct. The trust fund story ran with the kind of appetite that turned private pain into public spectacle. Our name that had once opened doors now invited scrutiny. My father issued a defiant statement, denying wrongdoing, and promising legal action. My mother remained muted. Liam made a public apology that was careful, earnest and full of the shame that comes when someone stops standing inside a lie. It's been a lifetime of being told what matters, he said on camera. I tried to make them proud. I hurt people doing it. I'm sorry. For a heartbeat the world held its breath, and then it roared again. The police investigation unfolded with the methodical drag of a macroscopic clock. Detectives took statements, bank officials opened requests. The storage locker that had once seemed only like an odd curiosity was catalogued and seized. Photographs and ledgers were inventoried. For the first time in years, the Mercer house was not the arbiter of truth it had once been. And yet the most dangerous thing about truth is that it does not always land where you expect. Sometimes truth reveals rewards, sometimes it reveals more dirt, sometimes it spawns collateral damage. As the legal and public drama swelled, someone sent a packet of documents to my inbox with no fanfare, and an attached line, "For your eyes only." I opened it and found a set of bank statements from an offshore account. The account at first glance had nothing to do with me. The transfers were small at first, then larger, then regular. The account name was a shell company registered under initials that matched my father's. The destination of many transfers was a company connected to a non-profit I had once supported voluntarily, one where Liam had sat on the board. I scrolled until my eyes twinged. There were strings of notes in the memo lines. For Liam, education, startup, keep quiet. There were entries that suggested payments to private investigators identified on earlier reports. Someone had been keeping a ledger that told a story not only of privilege, but of active manipulation. The packet included a final item, an unsigned letter. It said simply, "If you publish this, there is more." The sender wanted me to know that there were people who would not stop, who would escalate, and who knew where the pressure points were. The offer was blackmail shaped like a warning. I felt something like fatigue but sharp. The things that had once been small and painful had become a network of leverage. Someone had been running a system designed to keep a family narrative intact, and they would not give it up without a fight. Mara read through the papers and folded them like a map. "They are panicking," she said. "They are pulling levers, but we have public traction. We have witnesses. We have the tape." "Who sent these?" I asked. She shrugged. "Someone who doesn't want to be named, or someone who wants you to know they are in control." "Then we expose them," I said. "Exposure is good," she said, "but it can also provoke unpredictability. If they have access to offshore accounts and private investigators, the next move could be ugly." "Then we do it on our terms," I said. "We make it loud and we make it legal. We file what we have, and we let the rest be subpoenaed." Mara tapped her pen against the table. "I'll file it. We'll demand a full audit. We'll subpoena any account with your father's signature or initials." It seemed like the right fight to pick, but right fights have costs. People I loved might get hurt in the process. The public would savor the drama, the private would suffer. By the time the sun shrank, the world had shifted. My inbox filled with messages, support, hatred, curiosity. A tabloid called with a coy voice. A sympathetic journalist offered help for sourcing evidence. Friends offered to stand by me in court. People I had not spoken to in years offered to help with meals and childcare advice for neighbors who had kids. The world offered both a cloak and an audience. The family line tried a counter-move. My father released a video of his own, with polished cameras, and a voiceover about family values, and the pain of betrayal. He surrounded himself with family friends who praised his character and questioned motives. The campaign smelled of desperation. Then, in what felt like a fine desperate attempt, my father issued a statement that hinted at a hidden past. A sentence tucked into a press release, meant to be a cudgel. He suggested there were undisclosed matters involving decisions Ava had made at work that could call into question her professionalism. It was a threat and a promise. That night I sat on the dock with the cold lake breathing mist at my feet. The headlines felt like wind. I thought about the ledger and the tape, and the offshore account. I thought about everything they had tried to build, and then I thought about all the small things I'd done to earn what I had. Late nights, a refusal to be small, a steady work ethic that no one could audit away. Liam came down with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me with a way of looking that said he would be with me even if it cost him everything. "I want to help," he said. "I want to do what's right." "You already are," I said. "You just have to keep doing it." He sat and the lake folded around us like a listening thing. "We can take them down," he said quietly. "We can show everything." "Show what?" I asked. "All of it," he said. "The ledger, the payments, the threats. We can subpoena their bank records. They can't hide forever." "That's what Mara is doing," I said. "That's what the police are already doing. But there's always a new layer. There is a point in every battle where you imagine the victory and feel its weight. And at that precise moment, a different reality intrudes. The knowledge that someone still had cards left to play. Mine flashed like a match in my mind. An old address. A storage unit long closed. A name my father used rarely. I had forgotten it in the churn of evidence and hearings. But the key had reminded me. The key to the storage unit had been a small clue. And a small clue can open. Liam rubbed his thumb along the rim of his cup, and looked at me with a determination I had not seen before. We should go back, he said. We should check anything else they left. Why? I asked. Because the evidence is piling up. Because there is always more, he said. Because he didn't know we would look. That night we drove to the storage facility in the rain. The place smelled of dust and old lives, and the hum of fluorescent lights. The clerk had aged little since I'd signed the contract. He handed us a key after a long search through a clerk's ledger. The lock turned with a small, obedient click. Inside the unit, boxes sat in patient rows. We lifted lids and found the expected framed pictures, letters, the designed but buried under the orchestrations were things I had not expected. A set of CDs, labeled with dates and names. A roll of photographs with edges, worn from handling. A sealed envelope with a note in my father's handwriting. My heart started to run. I slid the envelope open, and pulled out a single sheet that made the blood in my ears go loud. It was not only a ledger, it was a plan. It outlined how to shape public perception, how to cultivate donors, who to buy, who to silence, and how to keep a family story clean. Under it, in a different hand, were names, investors, PR contacts, private investigators. My father's pen had circled one name, and written 4 words, keep close. Under that, a different handwriting, added, go sit. That last line looked like a command to ensure obedience. At the bottom of the page, someone had scrawled in angry ink, do not let her rock the boat. The page smelled faintly of coffee and something else, fear. I sat back on my heels, as rain smeared the facility's window. 1, 2, 3. The names matched the offshore transfer. The CDs matched the dates on the ledger. The photograph roll held images that were not only staged parties, but also receipts from hotels, dates that matched payments into a shell company registered under my father's initials. It was larger than I had imagined. In the quiet, Liam asked the question I'd been trying not to speak aloud. Why us? He said. Why us, Ava? I thought of my childhood. The empty chair they had photographed to force guilt upon me. I thought of the way my mother had applied her makeup to look convincingly distraught at the family meeting. I thought of the ledger. I thought of the tape in which my father said she would not fight. I thought of the key, the Polaroid, the note. Remember, because controlling us keeps their story intact, I said. Because if we aren't obedient, their world looks messy. Liam swallowed and reached for a box with gloves on. He lifted a small bundle of envelopes tied with a rubber band. He peeled one open, and read, there are letters here, he said. Letters they wrote to donors, and to people who helped them. They were asking favors, making promises. One letter was different. It was a letter addressed to me, unsigned. It read, we regretted how we handled things. We wanted you to be happy. There was an admission that had never reached me. The handwriting was my mother's. A weight settled on my chest. The admission was small, but admissions, once made, become knives that cut both ways. Admitting a mistake is different from making amends. Her confession had been put away like candy for later. The ledger had been the real currency. I gathered the documents into bags with the careful hands of someone cataloging evidence. When I emerged into the rain, my hair was wet, and my face felt stripped clean. How much of this will hold up? Liam asked. Enough, I said. Enough to make people look twice. We loaded the material into the car, and drove home with the rain, keeping time against the windows. In my bag was the letter in my mother's hand, the ledger plans, the CDs, and a small photograph, one I'd never seen before. In it, a young man stood on the steps of a small building, clutching a certificate. Beside him, my father beamed. The back of the photo had writing promise kept. As I laid each item out that night under the map of lamplight, the house felt smaller in some ways, and larger in others. I had more than I had imagined. I had a paper trail and a tape and a storage unit full of the ways they'd tried to control our stories. The same inbox that had brought blackmail now brought another file, a link to a live broadcast of a televised panel. My father and I were both scheduled to appear the next day on a morning show that had a way of making private things into national spectacles. Mara's line rang in my ear. They want you live, she said. We can control the narrative. It felt like a test. The The morning show studio smelled of makeup and coffee, and the faint nervous perfume of people who have spent their careers in light. The host's smile was bright enough to hurt. We sat across from each other under soft lights. My father looked like a man in armor, practiced and cool. He greeted the host with the same warmth he'd always used on donors and contacts. He looked comfortable in the light. I sat straighter. The questions started gentle and then narrowed like a net. "Do you admit to any wrongdoing?" the host asked my father. "Absolutely not," he said. "We are a family. We take these claims seriously and will cooperate. But my family name has been assaulted, Miss Mercer," the host said, turning to me. "You've made serious allegations. Why go public instead of handling it privately?" "Because private handles have been the mechanism for hiding it," I said. "Because if I had brought this to them privately, they would have buried it again. I chose to be visible so there could be accountability." There were nods and sympathetic murmurs from the audience. My father's jaw tightened. He spoke about lineage and duty and how the past was complicated. The twist came then, in a way no one expected. In the second half of the segment, the host played a short clip of a recorded conversation, one we had not released, the one with my father and my mother, the ledger on the desk. Cameras cut back to my father's face. Something flickered there right before he pulled his composure back. The host asked a question that was softer now but sharper in implication. "If these documents are real, what responsibility do you bear for your actions?" My father opened his mouth and then closed it. The entire studio seemed to inhale. He began. The pause was a universe. "Family is complicated," he said finally. It was not a confession. It was not innocence. It was the sound of a man trying to find a sentence that would protect everything. The audience moaned with the cheap satisfaction of soap opera. But the scariest part was what came next. My phone buzzed with an alert. A new file had been uploaded to an anonymous cloud. I clicked and saw a name appear that made the blood run cold. Truth.tbep. I opened it. The first line was a simple directive. Publish at your... The second line read, "There are recordings that will make everything worse." The third line was a list of names. And at the bottom a date. Tomorrow. I closed my eyes and felt the echo of a more dangerous tide rising. They had more than ledgers. They had more than staged photos. They had reserves of leverage that reached into places I had not yet imagined. The warning was a gauntlet thrown at my feet. I looked at Mara's face when I told her. She inhaled and let out a sound. That could have been a laugh or a sigh. "Then we file everything," she said. "Even if it exposes more?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Because truth is not a coin to be spent to buy peace. Truth is a thing that belongs in the light." Outside the rain had stopped, and the sky was a brittle, hard blue. I felt the future like a line of dominoes, each one waiting for a push. The push had already been made. I went to bed thinking about the photograph with "promise kept" written on the back. I thought about the ledger and the CDs and the tape. I thought about the idea that the people who love you can be the architects of your erasure. In the morning my inbox had another message. It was not anonymous this time. The sender name was one I had not expected to see. "Mother." The subject line read, "We need to talk." The body was 3 words. "I'm sorry." Then, under it, a line that changed everything. "Meet me at the old pier noon." I stared at the message until noon felt like a long way away. Noon was an hour that smelled like destiny. Noon was where reckoning often chose to show itself. I stood at the edge of the pier with the wind taking at my hair, and when she appeared, she looked 11 years old, and 80 at once. Her eyes were red but clear. "I am sorry," she said again. And this time there was no artifice in the words. I didn't know how to stop it. I thought, "What?" I asked. I thought our family needed to be whole. I thought if I kept the image then everything else would fix itself. I didn't know how to tell him no. I was afraid of losing the life I thought I'd made. "You were the one who dismissed my birthday," I said. "You were the one who chose him over me." "I know," she said, "and I have lived with that choice every day." Her apology was small, human, and then it widened. "But there is something else," she said. "I found something a long time ago. I couldn't bring myself to tell you, because I thought it would hurt you, and because I was afraid of what it would do to our family." "Tell me now," I said. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope that looked like it had been handled 1,000 times. Inside was a single photocopy of a document I had not expected to see, a page from the trust's founding documents, with an amendment scrawled in the margin. It read, in a shaky hand that was unmistakable as my father's, "Any money dispersed to family accounts, for educational or business purposes, may be relocated at the discretion of the patriarch." "And there's more," she said.
I swear I tried to stop it. I kept a list. I wrote down names of people I thought he was helping. I thought one day I'd show it to you. Then I got scared. Who else knows? I asked. Just me, she said. But now I can't be silent anymore. The document was a blow and a bomb at once. It proved the mechanism I'd been fighting was not accidental but intentional. It proved that our family had been engineered to preserve one son. Why now? I asked. Because he is going to make a play, she said. He plans to claim certain assets as family property. He wants to make sure no one can stop him. What play? He will accuse you of impropriety if you are loud enough, she said. He mentioned it. He said you could be made to look unstable, unethical. He will use what he can against you. I let her words anchor into me. She had been both a perpetrator and a confessor. Her apology did not erase the years. But it meant there was a crack in their armor where the light could get in. Then we show everything, I said. We bring it all out. We subpoena the trust documents, the offshore account. We bring in auditors, who will not be bought. She nodded. I will testify, she said. I will tell everything. The admission changed the map. It shifted allies. It made the fight not only my own but hers too, in a way that hurt and healed at the same time. We walked back along the pier and the sun found space through the cloud-smeared sky. For the first time in a long while I felt something odd and fierce settle inside me. The certainty that truth, once found, must be used. I did not know then all the ways that choice would unravel and rebuild. I did not know whether what we had uncovered would be enough. I only knew we had more than we had yesterday. That night the inbox chimed again with another anonymous upload. I did not open it immediately. In the quiet I understood one acute thing. They were not done, and neither were we. We had started a line of dominoes. A hand somewhere had placed another piece on the table. Tomorrow the world would watch as we pushed the next one.
Courtroom lights are smaller than camera lights, but they burn just as bright. They make everyone look honest or guilty depending on the way they hold their faces. The trial felt like a bad dream that kept insisting it was reality. Mira had a rhythm now. Papers filed, subpoenas served, witnesses lined up like beads on a string. Each bead told a part of the truth until the whole necklace could not be denied. They called my father in first. He sat like the man I'd grown up with, shoulders squared, voice practiced. He denied everything with that patient cadence he had used to steer donors and open doors. He spoke about legacy and stewardship and the burdens of leadership. He never used the word selfish. He never used the word apology. My mother took the stand next. Her testimony was a tremulous thing that felt like a blade turned both ways. She told the court about the ledger she had hidden, and the nights she had cried into the pillow because she had been afraid. She did not say she had been brave. She said she had been cowardly, and that was in its way an admission more piercing than any denunciation. Liam sat rigid in the gallery. He had decided to testify. He called his own conscience to the stand the way someone calls an overdue debt. I saw things, he said simply. I was complicit. I stayed silent because I feared my future would be taken if I spoke. Did anyone pressure you directly? Mira asked. My father made veiled promises, he said. He said he could pull favors. I was scared. I stayed quiet. I am sorry. The apology was small and enormous. The courtroom inhaled. For the first time, the Mercer name seemed like a set of human bones rather than a machine. Bones can break. Machines can be replaced. People are harder to remake. Detective Morales walked the jury through the evidence with the steady patience of a man who had seen the mechanical anatomy of greed. Storage unit receipts, offshore transfers, the tape, the staged photos, the ledger with margin notes, each one connected to the next like a forensic chain, and the chain was heavy. My father's counsel tried to pivot, to paint me as a disloyal daughter who weaponized private life. They framed my decision to go public as dramatic and self-serving. They accused me of staging parts of the narrative. It was a tired play in the theater of scandal. Mira struck back with calm ferocity. She laid out the audit trail not as accusation but as a map. She showed the chain of custody for the tape. She introduced the photocopy from my mother, and the note where my father had scrawled instructions. She called bankers who testified under oath about transfers. She called donors who had been solicited with promises recorded in the ledger. The jury watched the puzzle arrange itself into something precise and undeniable. During one recess, my mother found me in a quiet hallway that smelled faintly of coffee and the paper dust of other people's lives. She reached for my hand in a way that was without the old performance, lacking theatrical tears and timed anguish. I am so sorry, she said in a voice that had lost every veneer. I was afraid of losing everything. I thought if I kept the shape of our family I could keep the people in it. But I was wrong. I should have been brave sooner. I thought about the years of missing birthday calls, and about the photographs I had found at the storage unit. I thought about the Sunday when I had placed the albums on the table and told them the truth. What now? I asked. Tell them, she said. Tell them everything. I will tell them everything. Her words were a key turned in a new lock. It did not erase what had been done, but it made the path forward possible. It made the prospect of repair plausible without pretending the old architecture of our family could be rebuilt with the same bricks. The trial moved like a tide. Accusation, rebuttal, witness, cross-examination. The day the jury returned, the courthouse felt like a held breath. We sat with the knowledge that justice is not always swift, and that even when it arrives, its shape can be imperfect. Guilty on several counts, the jury said. Guilty on the counts that mattered. The judge read the verdict with the flat cadence of. For a moment the words felt like a release, and also like a wound. My father stood very still. The armor had cracks. He was taken into custody later that week. The sight of him in the back of a car felt wrong in the way that truth can be wrong for people who built lives on falsehood. People whispered and snapped photos in the courthouse parking lot. A life that had been polished to a mirror finish now had its reflection fractured. After the verdict, the world did the thing it does, turned the page and moved into the next headline. But the fallout for us was not a soundbite. There were civil suits to follow, asset freezes, forensic accountants who sorted through years of donations and transfers. The trust that had been used as a funnel for family funds was re-examined. Names were subpoenaed. Records were pried open the way lids are pried from jars in the sunlight. Liam called me the first morning after the verdict. I came to see you, he said. I sat on the dock. I wanted to see if you were okay. I am okay, I said. Not because this ended the way we wanted, but because the truth is finally out. He came over that afternoon with coffee, and a way of smiling that had lost its rehearsed ease. We sat on the deck and watched the boat wakes move like commas across the water. I want to make this right, he said. I will do what I can. And what about Mom? I asked. He paused. She told people the truth. She helped Mara. She broke down at one point on the stand. She's hurting too. She's paying a price she helped pick, I said. He nodded. She is. But she is trying to change. The aftershock of legal victory is not peace. It is paperwork, reconciliation, therapy and financial shrapnel. My father would face sentencing, my mother would face social consequences, and perhaps legal scrutiny of her own decision-making. Liam would rebuild a career on a foundation that would always be complicated by the choices he had made. I took a breath that felt like permission. I had wanted the world to know the truth, because I wanted to live without the net of their narrative. The truth was out. Now I had to decide how to live in its light. People offered help in quiet ways. Mrs. Calder called often, and told me about neighborhood plans for a fund she wanted to seed for kids who had been overlooked. Maya set up a small luncheon for the team. Daniel wrote a note that said simply, "You did the right thing." I filed civil claims to recover funds that had been improperly diverted. The legal work was less dramatic than the trial, but no less necessary. We sought a restructuring of the trust so that its future use would be transparent. The judge ordered audits and appointed a trustee unaffiliated with my father to oversee the remaining assets. We did not get everything back. Money has a way of dissolving when the teeth of law grip it. But we got enough to ensure that the narrative could change from secret manipulation to restitution. Some donations were redirected to charities we agreed on. Part of the funds were earmarked to establish a scholarship for students in underfunded programs, an attempt to turn ill-gotten leverage into something that made sense. That act of redirection felt like a strange alchemy. It was not revenge. It was reclamation. It did not cancel memory. It altered the future. In private, my mother asked me one small, human question that felt like one of the bravest things she had done in a long time. "Can you forgive me?" she asked. Forgiveness is not a single moment for me. It is a long, refusing thing. I thought of the candles I had waited for. I thought of the cake I ate alone. I thought of the albums I had left on the sideboard. Forgiveness would not mean erasing. "I can try," I said finally, "but I need boundaries. I need honesty. And I need you to keep telling the truth, even when it's hard." She nodded like someone bowed under the weight of a new vow. "I'll keep telling the truth," she said. We began to rebuild, slowly and awkwardly. There were therapy sessions for the family, not to absolve but to understand. There were phone calls that began with practical things: how to divide responsibilities for a mother's medical appointment, a brother's work suggestion, and then unfolded into looser exchanges about the weather and books and the small ordinary things that make life bearable. Liam and I started to talk more honestly than we had in years. He showed up at work events not as a shield for our family's image, but as a man making his own decisions. He apologized in public and then worked in private to mend the damage he had been part of. He did not expect that forgiveness would be immediate or complete. He accepted that That acceptance made him human in a way that had been lacking in the years when the Mercer machine ran like clockwork. One of the oldest gifts my mother offered me in the wake of everything was the album. She had taken the ones I left on the sideboard, the ones that had been full of staged photos, and her carefully curated memories, and she had filled a new book with the letters she had written but never sent, and with dates and notes about things she had been too frightened to say aloud. She handed it to me at a small family lunch that was careful and quiet and real. "I wanted you to see what I had hidden," she said. "I wanted you to know that some of it was fear and some of it was me. I'm sorry I put you last." I opened the book and read a letter she'd written that began, "I am sorry I forgot you were someone too." It was small and it was everything. After the storm there was a strange, luminous tenderness. It wasn't the tidy Hollywood ending. It was a patchwork of moments stitched awkwardly and honestly. I learned to invite people in and to keep the people who demanded me unchanged on the other side of my door. There were practical changes too. I had the lake house set up with better security. Cameras were installed after the Polaroid incident and after the midnight photographs. The neighborhood watched out for each other in a way that felt like a return to some basic human decency. Friends checked in with casseroles and texts. My work announced a new policy about personal attacks and smear campaigns, and offered support for employees targeted by harassment. Small ripples, but ripples that mattered. For a while I could not read the comments under my social posts. I learned to let the noise be noise, and to listen to the voices that mattered. One evening after months of court dates and depositions and negotiations, I sat on the dock with Mrs. Calder and a thermos of tea. She told me stories about being young in a way that made me laugh until my ribs ached. I took the laughter like a medicine. There was one twist that came later, quieter and stranger than the headlines. An old family friend, an accountant who had worked with my father for years, came to me with a confession that had no place in court but a place in the story. He had been asked once, years ago, to help smooth things, and had complied. He had kept a ledger in his own handwriting for years, anxious and ashamed, and he brought it to me as a gift and as restitution. "I can't change what I did," he said, "but I can choose the record that is now." He handed me the ledger, and in it were names of people my father had promised things to, private notes about how favors were bought, and a notation that tied several transfers to an anonymous account. It was not the decisive piece anymore. The decisive pieces were already in the public record, but it was another thread of truth. I used it to press for further transparency. I used it to help the victims of decisions made in the name of a family legacy. Justice is never a single blade. It is a work of small acts as much as of grand verdicts. On the first anniversary of the night I had left the Mercer house with the albums tucked under my arm, I invited friends to the lake. The deck glowed with lights and the smell of grilled corn. Guests brought casseroles and stories. I had baked a cake with 33 candles not because I needed them, but because I wanted to count each year as a witness to my choice. My mother arrived and stood a little apart at first, nervous and unsure of how to move toward a daughter who had once been an afterthought. She brought a small photo album she'd made that held pictures taken in the last year. Liam helping me put up a pergola, Mrs. Calder's quilt on the bed, a photo of me on the dock with my feet in the water, and a mug in my hands. She handed me the album and said simply, "For you." For a long moment I looked at her and felt the ocean of our past tides, of neglect and waves of small kindness, and understood that there was no single way to close the book. There was only the future and the care it required. Later, when the guests left and the dock echoed with the soft slap of water, I stood alone for a while and lit one candle and then another, not because I needed illumination, but because the light felt like promise. I thought about the woman who had once sat on the other side of the table at a family dinner and been told to support someone else's future. I thought about the choices I had made to claim my own. My phone vibrated with a message from Liam. "Be proud," it said. He added a photo, the framed photograph he had once given me, now hanging in my bedroom with a simple note beneath. "We are here." He had written the note himself. I answered with 3 words that felt like the end of a long prayer, and the start of a new one. "I am proud." The lake reflected the candlelight like 1,000 small promises. I looked out across the water and let the night keep its counsel. The house hummed with the comfort of people I had chosen, and who had chosen me back. I had wanted to be seen without being owned. I had wanted the right to build a life that answered only to my own worth. The truth had cost us a lot and given us a strange, priceless thing in return, the possibility of repair built on honesty rather than on a papered image. At the edge of the dock I lifted my glass to the dark water and listened to the small sounds of the world settling down. The question that had pushed me to leave in the first place came back like a familiar echo. What gift have you given yourself that changed everything? My answer this time was not a single pronouncement. It was a map of moments. It was buying a house with my own money.
It was lighting candles and inviting people who loved me. It was telling the truth when everyone else wanted a prettier lie. It was leaving a table that didn't serve me, and building another one where I belonged. I let the glass rest on the rail and watched the reflection break and reform. Again and again, the lake didn't care who we had once been, it only reflected what we asked it to. I raised my face to the stars and let the quiet answer me back. I had learned finally to give myself what mattered, and that more than any verdict or apology changed everything.